Alright guys, unfortunately we got a double whammy of negative PlayStation news here today, since PlayStation has come out and announced that they are closing the PS3 and PS Vita PlayStation stores. Again, if this sounds familiar, it's because they already announced this once before, back in 2021, I believe. They announced that they were going to be closing these stores, and there was a massive amount of backlash against it, and they gave us a stay of execution, which ended up lasting a lot longer than I expected it to, honestly. But now that it's finally coming to a close, and they are legit closing the stores this time, I don't expect them to delay it or cancel it again like they did last time. I think they are going to go through with it this time, which means we are going to lose official access to a absolute ton of games and DLC and content and everything for all those platforms. Which, one thing to remember, this actually also does sort of indirectly impact the PSP as well, since when we had this rigmarole before in 2021, the PSP store was one of the ones that was getting closed, and it actually did get closed at the time. However, all of the content on the PSP store is available on the PS3 and Vita stores, so there was still a workaround there if you had one of those consoles. You could purchase the content on there and then still go into your download history on the PSP, and it would be there, so you could still get it. So that workaround is going away as well, so any PSP content you would want to get, this is going to be the last opportunity to officially get that as well. So, this sucks, but it's one of those things that you knew was going to happen eventually. It's a miracle that we got it delayed the first time, and like I said, I don't think that's going to happen again. The one positive thing I can say about this is at least they gave you, a substantial heads up on this, because for at least most countries, it's not going to be closing until, I think they said June of next year, so almost exactly 1 year from now. So you at least have plenty of time to make any final purchases you want to make. You don't have to be in a rush or, drop a ton of cash you weren't expecting in a short period. Unless you're in a handful of Latin American countries where it's closing in like a month or two from now, I think. I don't know why they randomly decided to screw over those countries, but yeah. So in most of the world, you have at least a year for this. So you do want to get in any of those purchases you want now. I don't have any sort of comprehensive list or anything about what all is going away. It's so much stuff to go through, it would take a long time to make a list like that. I'm sure someone out there will do it. But there are a ton of games that are exclusive to that still, especially since PlayStation still hasn't bothered to implement any sort of, PS3 backwards compatibility or emulation or whatever on their newer consoles. So there is still a lot of stuff locked to PS3 that we're not going to have access to anymore. The one silver lining here is that all of these platforms are, let's say, swashbuckler friendly, so to speak. So if you want to resort to other methods, then, there is always that option. So it's one of those things. I hate to see it happen, but you knew it was just a matter of time. However, that is not the end of the bad news for today, since this was announced in one blog post on a separate blog post, which I will have links in the description to both of those. In a separate blog post, they also decided to come out and announce on the same fucking day that in 2028, they're going to cease production of physical PlayStation games entirely. Which, I don't know whose bright idea it was to announce both these things on the same day. Like, you couldn't even have enough sense to space these out by a few weeks or something. Like, my god. Within like a few hours, they come out and announce that, we're closing the old digital storefronts. Also, in the future, you're only going to have the digital storefronts. Like, the messaging on that is just absolutely catastrophic. So, this is horrible news to me as someone who highly values physical media, as someone who always takes the physical option when there is one to take, which is becoming more and more rare these days, unfortunately. But if a game gets a physical release, I'm always one to go for the physical release of that game. I only buy digital when there is no other option. And this pretty much confirms they didn't come out and say it, but if they're stopping production of games entirely, then it's obvious that the eventual PlayStation 6 is going to be a digital-only console. I would say that, best case scenario, maybe it's compatible with the PS5 disc drive, where you could, pop one of those into it, just for backwards compatibility purposes. Assuming the PS6 is going to be backwards compatible with PS4 and 5 games, which I wouldn't even say that's a given at this point, who knows. So, maybe if we're lucky, you'll still be able to do that and at least play your old physical games on a PlayStation 6. But since they're not going to be producing the fucking discs anymore, then any native PS6 game is obviously only going to be digital. Which, pretty much for me, means I'm not going to be buying a PlayStation 6. Which, I hate it. I mean, I collect consoles, I like having them. I've talked before how I like to get as many consoles as possible just because it's a piece of gaming history and I like to own that. But I'm not buying an all-digital console. There's absolutely zero purpose in doing so. The whole point of consoles was to get away from some of the negative things that PC was doing, one of which was, going all digital. However, now, as much as I hate to agree with the PC master race people, there pretty much is little to no reason to even get a console at this point, since consoles seem to be bound and determined to adopt all the negative aspects of PC without bringing over any of the positives. The negatives of PC gaming, it was digital only. Well, consoles are going down that route now too. It was more expensive, which I guess still technically it is, but it's not that much more expensive with the way console prices keep skyrocketing over and over. Which God knows how much that PlayStation 6 is going to cost. It's rumored to cost over $1,000. Honestly, I would be surprised if it was under $1,000, especially with the whole components issues right now with the memory and RAM and all that bullshit. So, it's going to cost you almost as much money as a PC anyway. It's still going to be digital only. You'll have to pay for your fucking online multiplayer, which you don't have to do on PC, so that's bullshit to begin with anyway. You're still going to have to fiddle around with all the graphical options, which was something that used to be a negative of PC and, not really an issue on console, just put in and play. But now, half the console games that come out have performance mode and visual mode and this mode and that mode, and you end up having to deal with a bunch of settings, graphical settings, and all that anyway. So, somehow they managed to take all the bad stuff from PC and bring that over with none of the good stuff. They didn't bring over the free multiplayer. They didn't bring over the more general freedom you have as far as, being able to access files and stuff on a PC. They didn't bring over things like mods for the most part. I know a handful of games, maybe some Bethesda titles or whatever, kinda, sorta support mods on console in a limited capacity, but, not nearly to the depth that it is on PC. So, at this point, you're much better off just investing in a PC if you're looking to get into gaming and you don't really have anything, or you're looking to upgrade or whatever. It might be a little bit more of an upfront investment. Not that much more, honestly, at this point. But you'll be able to do far more with it. You'll have far more freedom. You'll still have to deal with, digital only on most of your game purchases. But you'll have far more freedom with what you can do with those digital purchases. Especially if you purchase from places that are DRM free, like GOG or what have you. Obligatory fuck Steam comment, because DRM is DRM. I don't give a fuck how good their sales are. I don't like Steam. I'm not buying from Steam either. So, I think this is a horrible decision from PlayStation. They're losing me from it. I don't know how many people they're going to be losing besides just me. I know people like to talk about how physical is dying anyway, and all 90 billion% of people buy their games digitally instead of physically, which I can't prove it. I don't believe a lot of those stats that they give us, a lot of the data on that, since most of what I've seen saying 85, 90, whatever % of game sales is digital. The data I've seen, all of that data is everything. It's including game sales, it's including DLC, it's including microtransactions. And a lot of that stuff, there just simply isn't a physical option. So that's not really a objective comparison. I would like to see some data exclusively on games that did get a physical and a digital release to compare, what proportion of people bought that game physically versus digitally. I have yet to be able to find any data like that. If anybody out there knows where I can find that, let me know in the comments or something. I would love to see it. But I think that's a really unfair comparison, saying that, a huge portion of all these sales are digital only, when a lot of it, there is no other option than digital. So I absolutely can't prove it, but I don't necessarily trust those statistics anyway. I at least like to think that a lot of people still would choose physical over digital. I don't know how much this is going to impact sales. I think a potential PS6 being over $1,000 is probably going to impact it a lot more than any sort of, concerns as far as physical versus digital goes. But recently, Sony already had investor call or whatever, where they were talking about how they were less focusing on growing their user base now and more focused on squeezing more money out of the user base they already had. Well, they're going to have to squeeze a little bit harder, because their user base is going to be shrinking by 1 at least. Since I refuse to participate in this, there's no point in it. If you're going to go all digital, I might as well just buy the shit on PC, where I have at least a modicum of more control over it. So this is a horrible look from Sony, coming off of some more negative news from them, which I didn't even talk about, because I think it only affects Europe. I'm not totally sure, but I know there was a report recently that a lot of digital movies that people bought on PlayStation were getting revoked from their fucking libraries. Like, not even just delisted where you can't buy them anymore, like completely, like you already paid for them and they just take them away from you, which is insane to me. Now, that won't affect me regardless of region, because I don't own any digital movies, because I think that's fucking stupid. But that's an insane thing to do. And if you're one of those people affected by that, you absolutely have every right to be super pissed about that. And now, if they're going all digital routes with their games, there is absolutely no guarantee that they can't do that with games in the future, losing some sort of license or some sort of distribution rights or something, and games just start disappearing from your library. That is absolutely a possibility. Now, to make that clear, it is not happening right now, as far as like losing access to any games. Even with the store closures for PS3 and Vita, you're not losing any games you already bought. You'll still be able to re-download stuff and all that. You just won't be able to make new purchases after those stores close. But still, this is a huge negative to me. I think it does present a softball for Xbox in this situation to kind of go the opposite route and lean more into at least having a physical option. Now, I absolutely do not expect them to take that opportunity. I think they're going to fall right in line and goose step right along behind PlayStation in this aspect. I would be absolutely stunned if the Project Helix, whatever the next Xbox ends up being called, I would be absolutely stunned if that thing has any sort of focus on physical media, if it has a disc drive at all built into it. Maybe you'll have a detachable one like they have with PlayStation now, or at least be an option, but you gotta pay for it separate or something. But Xbox has already largely gone digital only for the most part anyway. At least a lot of their stuff doesn't get a physical release at all. You still got a few holdouts. But Xbox has heavily gone that way. PlayStation seems to be taking the full dive into it. Nintendo is sort of straddling the line, since they're still doing proper physical releases for most of their first-party stuff. But, of course, they have the game keycard bullshit on Switch 2 that is a joke in and of itself. That's hitting third parties pretty hard, especially ones like Square Enix. There's several Square Enix games on Switch 2 that I was interested in, and pretty much every one of them is a game keycard, so that means I'll have to wait till I actually get a Switch 2 and buy them digitally at some point. Which means I will be buying them at a deep discount and waiting on a sale, because I'm not paying full price for that shit. So, all around, it's just a negative outlook for physical media, which I maintain that people are going to live to regret it. Nobody wants to listen to me now. Everybody wants to talk about, digital is more convenient, which it is. But that convenience comes at a very steep cost, and you're not going to find out about it until it's too late. So, unless PlayStation walks this back, which I absolutely do not expect them to do, I guess I bought my last PlayStation console, which I hate to say that. I have every PlayStation console. I have a PS1 through a PS5. I have a PSP. I have a PS Vita. PS Vita that I recently had to mod. Not through my own choice, actually, because the fucking memory card died on it. But I guess now it works out in my favor, considering the current circumstances. But yeah, I bought every major iteration of PlayStation hardware up until now. I haven't gotten like the, pro models or whatever, but I have at least one version of every console they've ever put out. But I'm not going down that road. If you're going all digital with PS6, you've lost me as a customer. And frankly, I'm not too broke up about it. PlayStation's first party lineup isn't in the best shape in the world, to be honest. And I mean, I've got a backlog so steep I could not buy anything for like the next 20 years and probably still not be through the fucking thing. So I got a lot of problems, but being hurting for a new game to play is not one of them. So I'm not too concerned about it. I can go a long time without buying their shit. So if that's the route they want to take, I hope they have fun on it, because I ain't gonna be going with them. But anyway, I guess that's all I got to say. So lots of luck to you and yours.